The spacious headquarters of Blackstone, Global Holdings overlooked the city from its towering glass walls, where billion-dollar deals were made every week. Inside the luxurious executive lobby stood Ethan Carter, a 40-year-old single father with neatly combed dark brown hair, an athletic build and calm blue eyes. He wore a navy blue business suit with a light blue dress shirt, holding a cardboard box that contained his daughter's framed photograph, a small green desk plant, and the few personal belongings from 10 years of loyal service. Around him, employees watched in complete silence. Standing several feet away was CEO Victoria Blackstone, a powerful billionaire, businesswoman in her early 40s with shoulder-length chestnut brown hair, wearing an elegant black designer business suit over a white silk blouse. Her face was filled with anger as she pointed toward the exit. Beside her stood several executives, while security guards waited quietly near the reception desk. Victoria's voice echoed through the lobby. "You're not my employee anymore. Get out of my company." Ethan lowered his eyes for a brief moment before calmly lifting the cardboard box. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. Instead, he quietly replied, "One day you'll realize that loyalty is worth more than power." Victoria laughed coldly. "You're replaceable, Mr. Carter. Every employee is." Ethan looked at her one last time before saying softly, "We'll see." Without another word, he walked out of the building as dozens of employees watched with sadness. None of them knew that Ethan wasn't just an ordinary operations director. For years, he had personally built nearly every system, client relationship, security protocol, and supply network that kept Blackstone Global running. He had never taken credit because he believed success belonged to the whole company. But today, after being dismissed without appreciation, he decided he would never return. As the revolving glass doors closed behind him, Victoria believed she had removed a simple employee. She had no idea she had just lost the man holding together the foundation of her billion-dollar empire. The next morning, Blackstone Global continued business as if nothing had happened. Victoria Blackstone entered the executive boardroom confident that firing Ethan had been the right decision. She believed the company would move forward without difficulty. However, before the first meeting even ended, problems began to appear. The operations dashboard showed unexpected delays across multiple warehouses. Important client shipments were suddenly frozen. The IT department reported that several internal systems were failing because critical maintenance procedures had not been documented. Senior managers rushed from one office to another trying to solve problems, but every solution seemed to create two more. Victoria slammed her notebook shut in frustration. "Why is everything falling apart overnight?" she demanded. The chief operations officer swallowed nervously before answering. "Ma'am, many of these systems were personally designed and managed by Ethan Carter. He never kept the credit for himself, but he knew every client, every supplier, every emergency protocol, and every backup system." Victoria frowned. "Then call someone else." The executive hesitated. "We've tried. No one knows the company the way he does." At the same moment, Blackstone's largest international client called, threatening to cancel a contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars because promised deliveries had stopped. Another executive rushed into the room with even worse news. 3 more clients are demanding explanations. Within hours, the company's stock price began to fall as rumors spread that Blackstone Global was experiencing operational failures. Meanwhile, Ethan sat quietly at a small neighborhood cafe after dropping his young daughter, Lily, at school. He wasn't celebrating the company's problems. Instead, he was updating his resume while enjoying a simple cup of coffee. His phone rang repeatedly as former colleagues begged him to return, but he politely declined every call. "A company that doesn't value loyalty," he thought quietly, "will never learn until it understands what loyalty was worth." Back at headquarters, Victoria stood in front of the massive glass windows overlooking the city, watching the chaos unfold below. For the first time in her career, she began to wonder if firing one quiet single father had been the most expensive mistake of her entire life. By the third day, Blackstone Global Holdings was no longer facing small operational problems. It was in full crisis. Major clients had suspended contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Suppliers refused to release shipments because communication had broken down, and investors demanded emergency explanations as the company's stock continued to fall. News channels began reporting that the once unstoppable corporation was losing control of its own operations. Inside the executive boardroom, Victoria Blackstone stood before the giant financial screen, watching millions of dollars disappear every hour. For the first time since becoming CEO, she looked genuinely afraid. Every executive sitting around the table knew the truth, but was too nervous to say it aloud. Finally, the chief financial officer broke the silence. "Ma'am, we didn't lose the company because Ethan left." He paused before continuing. "We lost it because we never realized how much of the company depended on him." Victoria slowly sat down, remembering every late night. Ethan had spent solving problems while never asking for recognition. She remembered how he always stayed after everyone else had gone home, quietly protecting the company while raising his young daughter alone. Yet when accusations were made against him, she had never asked for his side of the story. She had simply pointed toward the door and ended 10 years of loyalty with a single sentence. "You're not my employee anymore." Those words now echoed painfully in her mind. Meanwhile, Ethan had accepted a consulting position at a small technology startup owned by a longtime friend. The company had only 20 employees, but within a few days, Ethan had already reorganized their operations, improved efficiency, and secured 2 major contracts. The young employees admired him not because of his experience, but because he treated everyone with respect. During lunch one afternoon, his daughter Lily visited the office after school. Looking around the cheerful workplace, she smiled and asked, "Dad, are you happier here?" Ethan looked around at the smiling faces of his new team and replied, "A workplace becomes successful when people value each other, not just profits." Back at Blackstone Global, Victoria finally made her decision. She stood before the board and said firmly, "Prepare my car." One executive looked surprised. "Where are you going, ma'am?" Victoria picked up Ethan's old employee file, holding it tightly in her hands. "I'm going to ask the one man I never should have lost to come back." Every executive watched silently as she walked out of the boardroom, realizing that this wasn't about saving the company's profits anymore. It was about admitting that the greatest strength of any business had always been the people who built it with loyalty. Victoria Blackstone arrived at the small startup office just before sunset. There were no marble floors, no luxury reception desk, and no rows of executives waiting to impress her. Instead, she found a simple workplace filled with hardworking people who greeted one another with genuine smiles. Through the glass office door, she saw Ethan Carter helping a young employee solve a problem while his daughter, Lily, sat nearby finishing her homework with colored pencils spread across the table. For a moment, Victoria didn't interrupt. She watched as Ethan patiently explained every detail to the employee before kneeling beside Lily to admire her drawing. It suddenly became clear why everyone who had ever worked with him respected him. Leadership had never been his job title. It was simply who he was. When Ethan noticed Victoria standing at the entrance, he quietly walked over. "Good evening, Ms. Blackstone," he said politely. Victoria looked at him with sincere regret. "I've come to admit that I was wrong," she explained, that the company was still struggling, major clients were leaving, and the board had finally realized how much Ethan had contributed over the years. "I thought I was replacing an employee," she confessed. "Instead, I removed the person who held the company together." She then offered him a promotion, a substantial salary increase, company shares, and complete authority over operations if he would return. Ethan listened carefully before smiling gently. "I appreciate your honesty," he replied, "but I don't want revenge, and I don't want to watch your company fail." Victoria looked hopeful. "Then you'll come back?" Ethan slowly shook his head. "No." The answer surprised her. "Why?" she asked softly. Ethan glanced toward Lily and then back at Victoria. "Because I finally found a place where people are valued before profits. Money can replace almost anything, except trust." Victoria lowered her head, knowing she had no argument against the truth. Before leaving, Ethan handed her a folder. Inside was a detailed recovery plan he had prepared. The night before, not because he wanted his old job back, but because he refused to let thousands of innocent employees suffer for one leader's mistake. Use this, he said. It won't fix everything overnight, but it will help your employees keep their jobs. Victoria looked at him in disbelief. Even after being humiliated and fired, he was still trying to protect the people inside the company. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Thank you." Months later, Blackstone Global slowly recovered by following Ethan's plan. The company introduced new leadership policies that required every employee to be heard before any major decision was made. Victoria often told new managers the story of the man she underestimated. Meanwhile, Ethan's small startup grew into one of the fastest-growing technology companies in the country. One evening, Lily looked up at her father and asked, "Dad, did you really take down the whole company?" Ethan smiled and gently shook his head. "No, sweetheart. I didn't take down a company. They brought themselves down the day they stopped valuing loyal people." Lily smiled proudly and hugged her father. And from that day forward, everyone who heard Ethan's story remembered one lesson. The strongest companies are never built by money alone. They are built by the people who remain loyal when no one is watching.